What does an elevator have to do with pastoral ministry? We're going to talk about that and more on this episode of the Starting Well podcast. Welcome to the Starting Well podcast. Whether you are a new pastor or you're beginning to serve in a new church, this podcast is designed to help you start well. I'm your host, Jason Lowe, and I serve as a regional consultant with the Kentucky Baptist Convention, and I am so glad that you've joined us for this episode. Let's get started. If you are a new pastor or you are beginning to serve in a new church, this podcast is for you. It's to help you start well. And so that's all we want to do in this podcast is encourage pastors, equip pastors, and help pastors get off to a good start, whether this is your first church or your fifth church or I hope not, but maybe your 15th church. We want to help you to start well. And so that's all that we talk about on this particular podcast is helping those new pastors in a lot of different ways. And one of the things I've discovered with new pastors is that many pastors come into a church and they have a plan. And that plan usually includes casting a vision that they feel that God has impressed upon them. And they want to share that vision almost immediately. Sometimes even during the interview phase, they have a strategy that they want to accomplish that vision. And so they begin to develop that strategy and implement that strategy on day one. And yes, because they have this vision and because they have this strategy, it no doubt includes making changes. And so many new pastors focus on casting vision, developing strategy, and implementing change. And those things are good. There's nothing wrong with those things. They're good and helpful, and they have their place in pastoral ministry. But before you cast a vision, before you develop a strategy, before you implement change, if you are a new pastor, there is one thing that is absolutely essential that you need to establish before you do any of those things, and it is to establish trust. Trust is foundational to your ministry. You have to build trust within the congregation if you are going to lead well and serve them well. You see, without trust, even the most gifted pastor in the world will struggle to lead effectively. But with trust, you'll begin to build a foundation for deep relationships. The likelihood of you having a long and fruitful ministry will increase dramatically, and you will have a significant kingdom impact in your church and in your community if you establish that trust early on in your ministry. And so in past episodes, if you have listened to some of our previous episodes, we've talked a lot about how you build that trust, how you need to live well and love well and learn well and listen well and, yes, lead well. We've talked about all of those things in previous episodes, how to build that trust. But today, I want to take a more foundational approach, and I want to talk about why that trust is essential. And I want to give you 3 reasons why you must establish trust if you want to start well in your ministry. And so let's go through these today on this episode. Number 1, you need to understand that trust grants you leadership permission. Trust grants you leadership permission. I've used this quote in a previous episode, and I'll probably say it many times. You're going to hear it a lot. John C. Maxwell says this: trust is the foundation of leadership. And he's exactly right. If you don't have trust, it's going to be very difficult for you to lead. And so on day one, when you first begin your ministry at your church, you have a position. You have a title. You're the pastor. If there's multiple staff, you are likely either the senior pastor or the lead pastor. But you have a title of leadership. You have a position of leadership. But the reality is that the church won't follow you very far until they trust you. So you may have that position of leadership, but you haven't earned the trust of the congregation yet. And so you may be called a leader, but if you're leading and nobody's following, you've probably heard the saying, then you're just taking a walk. And so you need to understand that trust truly is the foundation of leadership. People will only follow you if they trust you. John chapter 10, verses 3 through 5, Jesus is talking about how he is the good shepherd. And he says this about being a shepherd. The sheep hear the shepherd's voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. And when he has brought out all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. They know it. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. And so don't miss what Jesus is saying here. The sheep will only follow the shepherd if they know the shepherd, if they know his voice, if they trust his voice, they will follow him. He will call his own sheep by name, and he will lead them out. He will go before them, and the sheep will follow him because they know his voice. But a stranger, somebody that they don't know, somebody that they don't trust, it says that they will flee from him because they don't know the voice of strangers. And so when you first start at your church, you have a title. You are their pastor. But you're still a stranger. They don't know you yet. They don't trust you yet. And so your title will grant you a level of authority to lead, but trust will grant you permission to lead. And if you truly want to start well, you have to gain that trust and gain that permission. Now, in the beginning of this episode, I told you that elevators have something in common with pastoral ministry. And maybe you're thinking, what in the world is he talking about? Well, it's very simple. I'm only going to step onto an elevator and press the button if I trust that elevator. I'm not getting on an elevator that looks like it's broken down, that it looks like it could drop me 10 floors to my death. I'm not getting on an elevator. I only will get on an elevator that I trust will get me to where it's supposed to take me. And so when I step on that elevator and I press that button and those doors close, I'm giving that elevator permission to take me to the 12th floor or whatever floor you want to go to. But I will only press that button if I trust the elevator. And then I give it permission to take me there. If I don't trust that elevator, if it looks like it has seen better days, and if it looks like it may have taken its last ride, I'm not giving that elevator permission. Give me the stairs every time because I don't trust that elevator. And so the same thing is true in pastoral ministry. Your church members will only follow you if they trust you. And when they trust you, they will give you permission to lead them. But until they trust you, they're going to resist your leadership. They're certainly not going to give you permission. They're certainly not going to give you their blessing. They may give you their complaints. They may give you their resistance. But with that permission, when they trust you, the church is much more likely to respond to the vision that you've developed, that you've sensed the Lord is impressing upon your heart. They're going to be much more likely to respond to that strategy to carry out that vision. And yes, they'll even be more open to responding well and positively to any changes that you implement. Okay? But it all begins with that trust. Trust grants you leadership permission. That's why it's absolutely essential for starting well. Okay? So that's the first reason. The second reason, and you're going to notice that all three of these reasons are very closely related to one another. But the second reason is that trust allows you as the pastor to make mistakes. I know that this may come as a surprise to some of us, but none of us are perfect. Not one of us is perfect, except for Jesus. He's the only one who is perfect. But the rest of us, we're not perfect. We have made mistakes, and we will make mistakes. It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. You and I make leadership blunders all the time. Sometimes your idea that you have for your church will fail miserably. You thought it was a good idea, and it turns out to be a terrible idea. It happens. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Sometimes you're going to make plans that you think will have one particular outcome, but they end up having a very different outcome. And it's not a good one. It's not what you'd hoped for. It's not what you had predicted. It's not what you said would happen, but yet it happens that way. And then you look like you've made a mistake. Sometimes you're going to say things that will be misinterpreted. Sometimes you're going to say things that you certainly wish that you could take back. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are. Mistakes happen. But when they happen, if you have established trust, then your church, they certainly may be disappointed. They may be upset. They may be not happy with the outcome. But if you have established that trust, they're going to be disappointed, but they're going to understand. And they're going to forgive you. And they're going to give you the opportunity to continue to lead them, if you've established that trust. But if you don't have that trust, then brother, it is a completely different story. If you don't have that trust, every mistake that you make, every slip of the tongue, every failed idea will be magnified exponentially. And they'll begin to hold those things against you, and they're going to be less likely to follow your leadership in your next endeavor than they were previously, because they don't trust you. And if you keep making mistakes without that trust, then they're going to continually get more and more and more upset with you. And it will likely end in a conflict or division or who knows what the outcome might be. And we've talked about some of those in the first episode on this podcast. Go back to listen to episode number 1 if you want to learn more about a big mistake that a lot of new pastors make. And if you don't have that trust, they won't forgive you for that mistake. But you see, trust allows you to make mistakes. And that's good news for imperfect people like you and I. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. We make mistakes. But trust allows you to make those mistakes. And I'm about to share one with you that I made. And you may listen to this story and you may think, why in the world am I listening to a word this brother says? Because early in my ministry, I still cringe thinking about this. But early on, as I was a pastor in a church, it was a small church, I had developed good relationships with those people. I had established that trust. But I'll never forget, on an Easter Sunday, we had our biggest crowd of the year, probably very similar to your church. We had all these people there, and I thought I was being cute. I thought I was being clever. And here's what I said. And again, I cringe to even think about it, but I welcomed everybody to the service, and I made a comment along the lines of the CEO Christian. And maybe you've heard of the CEO Christian. I hope that you've never actually said this publicly like I did, but I talked about the CEO Christian, how we're so glad to see the CEO Christians. And the CEO Christian stands for Christmas and Easter only. Oh my goodness. Yes, I actually said that. And I was proud of it. Oh, I thought I was so clever and so cute by saying that. And I'll never forget the following Wednesday, dear brother in that church came to me and told me that he was disappointed in what I said. Because after the service, his son and his daughter-in-law and their kids, who hadn't been to that church since Christmas, were very upset with the comment that I made. And I completely understand why. Because it was a stupid mistake. And I made it. And I pray that you don't make that mistake. You'll make mistakes, but I hope you don't make that one. Oh, it was awful. It was terrible. And you know what? If I had not established trust with this brother, if I had not built a relationship with him, if I hadn't been to his home and gotten to know him and gotten to know his wife and prayed with them and loved on them and built that relationship with them, if they did not trust me, they could have held that against me. They could have blown that all out of proportion. And thankfully, that was not the case. Because they allowed me to make a mistake. Because they knew that I loved them. And they knew that I was young. And they knew that I was inexperienced. And they knew that I was going to make mistakes because I'm not perfect. And that's what trust provides you the opportunity to do. To be who you are. To make mistakes. To reveal to others that you are just like them. You are imperfect. And so whenever you think about leading your church, serving your church, if you want to start well, you have to build that trust. It's absolutely essential because trust grants you leadership permission. Trust allows you to make mistakes. And then third and finally, trust also minimizes unnecessary conflict. You see, in a fallen world, conflict is absolutely inevitable. It's going to happen. We're going to be in conflict with one another this side of heaven. It's just going to happen. But just because conflict is inevitable does not mean that all of it is absolutely necessary. In fact, we're going to talk about this in later episodes. We're going to spend a whole episode talking about what is necessary conflict in a church and what is unnecessary conflict. And let's be honest, most of the conflict that takes place is usually unnecessary. But if your church trusts you and you make a mistake, just like I did with that CEO Christian comment, if your church trusts you, they will be more likely to overlook that offense and avoid the conflict altogether. They're going to see you for who you are. That you are not perfect, that you're still a sinner, that you still make mistakes, and they'll be more likely to overlook that offense. But if they don't trust you and you make even the simplest of mistakes, they're going to hold it against you. There's going to be conflict that likely breaks out. It's right around the corner if they don't have that trust in you and in the relationship that you've established with them. And so establishing trust does not guarantee the absence of all conflict. You can build that trust and still there might be conflict from time to time, but it will certainly minimize it. But only if you have built that trust. You see, trust grants leadership permission. Trust allows you to make mistakes, and trust minimizes unnecessary conflict. And so if you're a new pastor, or you hope to become one in the future, or you're beginning in a new church, don't rush to share a new vision or develop a detailed ministry strategy or implement significant but non-urgent changes. Don't rush to do those things right away. Those are helpful and those are necessary, and you'll need to do some of those things in time. But the first thing you need to do is take the time that's necessary to build that trust. And you do that by living well, by loving well, by learning well, by listening well, and by leading well. That's how you build that trust. You see, in pastoral ministry, trust isn't a bonus, it's the foundation. You must have trust if you are going to lead effectively. But if you establish that trust, if you build that foundation, if you have a firm foundation, everything then in your ministry in that church can be built upon that strong foundation. And so, if you're a new pastor, I hope that this has been helpful for you to think through why trust is essential for starting well. And so that's all we've got for this episode. This one's a little shorter, and sometimes that'll happen. But I'm so thankful that you've joined us for this episode. If you haven't done so yet, go ahead and subscribe in your podcast listening app of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or something else. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes that we release. And if you haven't done so, leave us a rating and a review, because that helps other pastors find this podcast and benefit from this podcast, just like I hope it's beneficial for you. And so do that for us. That'd be a great help. If you would subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a 5-star review, we'd love it. If it's not a 5-star review, hey, we need to know that too. But until next time, may you shepherd the flock of God among you well. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Starting Well podcast. For more resources, please visit us online at startingwell.net. For more information about the Kentucky Baptist Convention, go to kybaptist.org.